District for Thursday, June 10th, 2021. Call to order, pledge the flag. Please excuse me, but I will not stand. If you would repeat after Director White, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you all. Moving on to the Metro Cable announcement.
Director Kelly, this is John Lawver. Can we start with a roll call?
Oh.
Yeah, we should make a roll call, make sure we have for the record, a quorum.
I
know we can see everybody, but for the purpose of the record.
Thank you for reminding me. It's just not on the agenda, so I don't typically remember. All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Director Gould?
Here.
Orzelli?
Here.
Wood?
Here.
Director Sheets is absent. Director Jones?
Here.
White?
Here.
Clark?
Here.
Sailors?
Here.
And Kelly?
Present.
Perfect. We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the Metro Cable announcement. And Mr. Lauber, thank you for the reminder on that. Metro Cable announcement, the open session meeting is videotaped for cablecast on Metro Cable 14. Replay on Sunday, June 13 at 4 p.m. and Monday, June 14 at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. Webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within district jurisdiction, including items on or not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers?
No one has contacted me ahead of time, but Art, can you please unmute everyone so they can speak if they so choose?
Well, no interested parties?
Nope.
So then we will move on to the consent agenda. A lengthy consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the consent.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Director Wood and a second by Director Clark for the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll? Any questions on the consent agenda? No.
Mr. Chair, I have a question or more of a comment.
Go ahead.
As we look at the, you bet, thank you, Chair. As we look at the consent agenda this evening, I think it's important to point out to the public item number 8 in the consent agenda and make recognition that this agency is doing a stellar job in working towards prevention of insurance claims and working very diligently with our staff to ensure that we're not escalating that. But despite those efforts and significant efforts by our labor group in working hard with staff, those costs continue to escalate in situations that we have no control over. And so I think it's important that the public understand that other behaviors associated with citizens exercising some of their rights when they go violent cause our insurance agencies to take a step back and look at their risk. And so when people think that the violent exercise of their rights has no cost, I hope the public recognizes that it does have a cost. And then when it becomes violent and there's issues related to that, that our costs go up extremely high. And you can see just year over year that we buy our insurance as a collective. And when those costs go up, it impacts everyone. And so this will put our agency in some future strains as these insurances, which are mandated and important, continue to escalate because citizens in our community exercise their rights, but they do so in a violent manner. And I just think it's important that we show that and we demonstrate and just reveal that to the public so that when they wonder why our insurance goes up, like it did this year, such an extreme amount, It's nothing to do with the behavior of our folks. It has all to do with the behavior of people that may not even be in our community. But since we buy in a collective, we have no option here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Gould. All right then. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, directors. Moving on to the action items. Mr. Campo, you will be making a presentation on the preliminary budget.
Thank you, Board President Kelly. I will turn this over to the Fire Chief to make some preliminary comments if he'd like to.
Thank you, Ken. Tonight we have the preliminary budget. We presented the budget before the Finance Committee at our last meeting. As I said there, I feel very good about the budget as we move forward. We were able to maintain a lot of the 5-year goals. When we look at apparatus replacement, we look at what we've been able to do with buying SCBAs, being able to maintain our level of equipment and being able to build those into there. Spent a lot of time with Ken over the last few weeks going through those things, looking for opportunities. And so tonight, Ken, I'll turn it over to you to present the preliminary budget.
Thank you, Chief. And again, President Kelly, members of the board, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present this preliminary budget for fiscal year 21-22. I will attempt to share my screen. And I think the host needs to enable my screen sharing. Here we go. Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned, I will be presenting the budget this evening, but I have to give credit where credit is due. So Amanda Thomas, before she left, was working very diligently to complete the preliminary budget. I believe I was getting emails from her as late as 6 p.m. on her last day of work, giving me all the details and the latest changes going into the preliminary budget. I know we're trying to find a replacement for Amanda. It's going to be very, very tough assignment. But I got to give her credit as well for continuing to develop her finance team. The district is very fortunate to have some very dedicated and qualified folks in the finance division. And I'd like to give credit to Ron Imperdad, your controller, as well as Sarah Ortiz, your accounting and payroll supervisor, and Tara Mailer, accounting analyst. They've done a fantastic job, not only with this preliminary budget, but over the past year, just keeping everything going during the pandemic. So I just wanted to give them credit where credit is due. So as the chief mentioned, the general fund balance is essentially, the general fund budget, I'm sorry, is essentially balanced with projected spending and transfers out equal to the projected revenues and transfers in. As we go through this presentation, you'll see increases in property tax revenue, GEMT, medic cost recovery, and a continuation of the IGT intergovernmental transfer program. We're also experiencing labor cost escalation, driven primarily by pension and medical costs, and we'll get into some more detail on that in the presentation. we were able to maintain the general fund reserve at about 15%. This is toward the bottom of the board's goals, but we were able to maintain at least at that 15% level. And we'll probably end up doing a little bit better as we get, as we close out the year, if history proves true. Typically, the actual revenues come in a little bit less than the budgeted revenues or I'm sorry, the expenditures, and revenues come in maybe slightly higher. We just received notification last week that the district's going to receive an additional, probably about a net $700,000 of GEMT revenue, ground emergency medical transport revenue, related to prior years. So that's just one example. And I should also mention that it takes, with projected spending of about $230 million, it takes several million dollars just to move that needle on the general fund reserve by 1%. So just as an order of magnitude. And of course, the results of the current ongoing MOU negotiations could require further adjustments to the budget. And I'll just say overall, heading into the current year we're in now, fiscal year 2021, there was a lot of uncertainty over the financial impacts of the pandemic. And we weren't sure what was going to happen in terms of revenues and expenses. But I think it hasn't turned out to be as bad as, some folks may have thought. And a large part of that is the property tax revenue, continues to grow. And we're projecting about a 4% increase for the upcoming fiscal year. We'll show that in a slide coming up. And feel free to jump in if you have any questions at all. The board has seen this slide before. This is looking a historical look at property taxes compared to all other revenues of the district. Look at the property tax revenue projected for fiscal year 21-22 at $174 million at the far right. That represents about 70% of all revenue sources for the district. When you look back at 2008, 2009, that $128 million on the far left was about 80% of overall district revenues. So out of probably more necessity than anything else, those other revenues are becoming a larger portion of the district's funding, which is good because you want to become, you don't want to be totally reliant on one source of revenue. I'd also point out on this slide for the board that the impact of the recession, the Great Recession, as it's referred to, you can see that drop in revenue, in particularly property tax revenues from 2008, 2009 to 2009-10. That was about a $16 million drop in that 1 year. And that kind of continued down for a while. But that gives you an order of magnitude when you're looking at your reserve requirements. So bear in mind that general fund reserve is projected next year to be about $35 million. So that would be roughly, twice that drop that happened back during the Great Recession. Just wanted to point out that fact. Okay, this is an overall fund summary looking at the various funds that the district maintains. So you have the general fund, your capital facilities fund, lease property fund, your grant fund, development impact fee fund, and the IGT or intergovernmental transfer fund. So it shows you the beginning balance, the revenues and other financing sources, expenditures, other financing uses. You can see in the general fund, it starts out at $34.1 million and ends about $34.4 million. It's about a $278,000 increase. So again, General fund is essentially balanced. See a decrease in the capital facilities fund as we're incurring more expenditures than revenues for that fund. So it's going to project to end up with about $2.2 million. The lease property fund is essentially flat, starts out with about $1 million, ends with about 1.1 million. I believe that's the district's target to maintain about $1 million in that lease property fund. And you can see the grant fund, we're using up the grant proceeds, the carryover proceeds from last year. So those will be expended this year. So that fund will be essentially zero by the end of the year. Development impact fees, it goes down substantially because of the expenditure on Station 68 construction costs, projected at about $5.8 million for next year. So we're going to have to replenish that development impact fee fund. And the IGT fund is just funds that are waiting to be transferred in or out or back and forth from the state. And I just got word last week from the district's consultant for this program that the checks from the various hospitals should be arriving within the next couple of weeks. I'd just like to point out overall, you see the expenditure line there at $273 million, almost 274 million, even net of transfers. It's still about $260 million of expenditures. So this district is a significant operating entity. Requires significant administrative and financial oversight to keep this ship afloat and moving in the right direction. And a lot of credit goes to the board of directors for over the years putting in the appropriate administrative and fiscal policies that are needed to keep the district on a fiscally sustainable path as you move forward. So now we'll take a closer look at the general fund in terms of its activities for the year. So the first note is property taxes. The property taxes are the most significant operating source of operating funds for the district. Those are projected to go up about 4% and generate an additional $7 million for next fiscal year. Overall revenues, about $238 million, about a $9 million increase. And we'll go into more details in subsequent slides here. Labor costs, I mentioned the labor cost escalation. Labor costs at $204 million projected for next year. It's about a $7.6 million increase. 6 million of that happens to be related to pension costs. I have a slide that covers that a little bit later. Overall expenditures, $240 million. So overall spending will be up about $10.3 million from the current year. You can see there's a $3 million operating deficit there between the revenues and expenditures. And that's made up by those transfers down at the bottom. So net transfers of about 3.3 million offset that operating deficit. So you end up with about that. There's that $278,000 overall increase in the general fund balance. And this is just another way to look at the revenues. So this is the revenue pie. You can see the biggest slice of the pie is property taxes at $174 million. There's the representing 70% of overall revenues. Charges for services, which include the medic cost recovery, is about $58 million. So that's the other large component, 24%. That's the slice that's been growing over time from 2008, 2009, that earlier slide that we saw. We have intergovernmental revenue of 4.1 million. It's pretty much the GEMT program. Operating transfers, 9.4 million. That's the net IGT that we discussed, and then all the other revenues about 0.7%. This is just a recap of the general fund revenues. So again, overall revenues are projected at 238 million next fiscal year, a $10 million increase over what we were projecting at mid-year for 2021. Property tax revenues are projected to be up $7 million. Medic cost recovery, 1.7 million. It's primarily representing a return to kind of pre-pandemic activity for the ambulance transports. And ground emergency medical transport revenue is projected to be about $3 million next year, which is a $2 million increase. And that's because there's been about a 3-year delay in receiving this GEMT revenue as the state goes through a new SPA or specific plan amendment related to this program. And that's important because that amendment, this latest amendment, would allow additional cost recovery for engine response to a EMS call. Right now, it's only the ambulance that the district receives those reimbursement for the costs associated with the ambulance. If this new SPA gets approved, the thinking is that's going to include the response for the engine and the paramedics on the engine as well. So that could be some additional revenue beyond what's currently programmed. And again, I mentioned the IGT revenue, the net transfer is about $9 million coming into the general fund for total financing sources of about 247 million. And that's added to the 238 million of revenue. Next, we have an overall look at the spending side of the equation for the general fund. And you can see the largest component there, of course, is labor costs at $204 million. Next is services and supplies at 32.5 million. That represents another 13%. And we have the category of taxes, licenses, debt service, about 4.3 million, and 6 million of operating transfers out. And we'll look at the detail for those. So again, the labor budget is up approximately $8 million compared to the current year. And the changes there are increases in required pension contributions, along with increases in the OPEB contribution for retiree medical, the pre-funding of retiree medical expenses. We built in an assumed increase for medical premiums, both for active employees and retirees. We have 6 months of the January 1, 2021 wage increase that's built into that labor cost budget. And we're assuming vacant positions will be filled and workers' comp down somewhat from last year. Last year, there was a spike in workers' comp related to COVID-19. And so we're projecting more normal level of activity there. The overall labor costs are up about 4%. So that $8 million represents about a 4% increase. And just note that that pretty much matches the increase in that we're projecting for property tax revenue for next year. Okay, the services and supplies budget at about $33 million. This represents about a $3 million increase compared to the current year. Half of that relates to the increase in the premium for liability and property insurance. I think the board heard from your broker last meeting on the causes for that increase. We're projecting about a $600,000 increase in the regional fire and emergency communication center contribution from the district. $300,000 increase for safety, clothing, supplies, and related services for the fire academy. upcoming fire academies, and about a $300,000 increase for GEMT administration. This is the statewide administration that the district receives reimbursement from those participating agencies. And the reason it's so high is because really represents 3 years worth of activity. This category of debt service assessments and contributions totals $4.4 million. The largest component is the assessment paid to the county for property tax administration. There's $1.7 million assessment paid to the state for the GEMT QAF program, the quality assurance fee. That again is offset by QAF reimbursement revenue. And then there's a small contribution from the general fund for debt service on the lease revenue bonds, about $300,000. Again, here's the net transfer of $3.2 million. There's $6 million going out of the general fund to the capital facilities fund and the grants fund. Actually, it's just the capital facilities fund. It's about a $600,000 reduction from this current year we're in. And then the net $9.4 million transfer coming in from the intergovernmental transfer fund, which is roughly the same level as this current fiscal year, 2021. So this is a little more detailed look at the capital facilities fund. See projected spending of about $14.3 million. We'll get into that detail, but it's roughly $8.5 million on capital equipment and $5.8 million roughly for debt service. Of that $8.5 million of capital spending, 1.6 million of that is carryover lease financing from this current year, and 6.6 million of new lease financing that will take place in fiscal 21-22. Those are those two components. And so we're going to draw down about 1.6 million from the capital fund, leaving a projected ending balance of about 2.2 million. If we refer back to that initial slide we were looking at. Looking at that capital expenditures, again, this fund is going to receive about $6 million from the general fund, primarily for debt service payments. That $8.5 million capital spending is broken down below there: 3 Type 1 engines, 2 Type 3 engines, a new truck, 3 Type 5 engines, and a water tender. Those are the projected expenditures for next year, or purchases, I should say. And just quickly, the grant fund, we're projecting about $1 million of new grant proceeds coming in, and $2 million of expenditures as we complete the open grants for the year. And again, the ending balance, I should point out there's no transfers coming into the grant fund from the general fund or the capital fund. Oops. And so we're projecting pretty much a zero fund balance at the end of the year as we complete all the grants. Again, this is the leased properties fund. Both lease revenue and expenses are pretty much even, projecting a slight surplus of about $24,000. Again, the ending balance here is projected about to be about $1.1 million, which I believe is the target balance that the district would like to maintain in this fund. I should point out in those expenditures, 817,000 expenditures, about 450,000 of that is for air compressors. I believe here at here at the headquarters building. Those are going to be replaced over time. I know last meeting, Director Jones raised a question about debt service, I think in particular lease revenue bonds, but I wanted to provide just an overall summary of the debt payments that are budgeted for next year. You can see they total about 13.4 million there at the bottom right. About half of that is going for equipment leases and about half for pension bonds. And the lease revenue bonds, the total budget for lease revenue bonds is about $600,000 currently. Look at this next slide, which is looking at future debt payments going out through the term of the lease bonds in 2041. I'd like the dark brown area of those bars represent the pension obligation bond debt service. That goes away in 2026. And right now the debt service on that is, for back to that last slide, was about $7 million. So that's $7 million that becomes available after those bonds are extinguished in 2026. And as I mentioned, the lease revenue bonds go out to 2041. So those are the longest term debt that the district has. And I talked to some folks about, some underwriters about the opportunity to refinance those lease revenue bonds. Because really we're in a historic low in terms of interest rates, and it would be a shame to miss out on that. And so I know there's call protection on these bonds, so they can't be called before 2022. I believe they're call protected through May of 2022, but they can actually be refunded three months prior to that. So the February 2022 timeframe. So there were several options that we explored. One was looking at an advance refunding, where you issue new debt now, put it in an escrow account, pay it off when you can first call those bonds. Unfortunately, that option was
Oh no, did Ken disappear?
Yeah.
We
Aliens
lost Ken.
bonded with our CFO.
Uh-oh.
Let's get him back.
Oh no. Let me call
Right when
him.
it was getting interesting.
Yeah, I know.
Save some money.
Greg, go ahead and just pick it up. I know we went through this with him. I don't think I could do it. Do you?
It's nothing I did, I hope.
No, we went through the presentation and on the lease, on the bonds and the opportunity. It is, Gay, I'm with you. There's some things that we have. Oh, there he is. Come on in. He doesn't know what happened, but.
Thank you, Chief.
Here's that portion right there.
Hello there again. My laptop decided to go through a series of updates and restart itself. So I apologize for that. But what I was going to mention is that there's opportunity to refinance these lease revenue bonds. And we can do it now in what's called a forward rate lock, where we could actually lock in a rate today and accomplish the refinancing in February of 2022. And that would save the district about $115,000 a year through the end of the 2040 term. It would be about $2.2 million in savings over the term of the bonds, with a net present value savings of about $1.7 million. So I think it would be worth looking at that option. And that actually concludes my presentation. A recommendation is to approve the budget resolutions A through G included in the board packet. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that the board might have.
Do any board members have questions of Mr. Campo? And Mr. Campo, please accept my thanks for doing such a wonderful job presenting the preliminary budget.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Directors, any questions? Please speak up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Gay Jones. Ken, can you tell me, is it not worthwhile to do the pension obligation bonds in that same format that you mentioned, the lease revenue
Thank
bonds?
you. That's an excellent question, Director Jones. The problem is it's such a short time frame from to 2026 that it probably wouldn't make a lot of sense to incur the cost involved in the refinancing.
That's
yeah,
fine. I just wanted to double check on that.
Yep.
Thank you, Ken.
Any other directors? Director White, I see your hand moving.
Just a question of where are the rates at today that you believe we could lock into at a fixed rate?
Again, excellent question. The current bonds are, I think, in excess of 5%, and the rate lock would be about 3.1%. That would be the all-in cost with cost of issuance and everything built in. And that's given, that's because we're essentially doing a 20-year term on these bonds. So I think 3.1% would be an excellent rate if we can lock that in.
And Ken, did you project the overall savings would be 1.7 million or hundreds of thousands? I missed that.
It'd be 2.1 million over the 20-year term. And when you bring that back to the present value savings is about 1.7%. So it's about a 23, represents about a 23% net savings.
Does sound worth it.
Yes, I think so.
Thank
Any
you.
other directors? You're welcome. Seeing no other directors, Mr. Campo, thank you again very much. Chief, do you have anything to add?
No, this is an action item, so we'll have to go through each one of the items here and
I
adopt
understand.
if you agree
Okay.
with our plan moving forward.
All right, then. Directors, you can see it's an action item. We have A through G that we must adopt separately, vote separately, motion separately, etc. So I would accept a motion for item A.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item A, resolution 2021 to 2022 preliminary budget for the general operating fund 212A.
Second.
We have a motion by Director Wood and a second by Director Clark. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Board, what's your pleasure with item B?
Mr. Chair, I'll move item B, resolution 2021 to 22 preliminary budget for the capital facilities fund 212D.
Second.
We have a motion by Director Wood and a second by Director Clark. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Your pleasure with item C.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item C, resolution 2021 to 2022 preliminary budget for the grants fund 212G.
Second.
We have a motion by Director Wood and a second by Director Clark.
We got
Madam
this.
Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
and Kelly.
Aye.
Motion passes.
What is your pleasure with item D?
Mr. Chair, I'll move item D, resolution 2021 to 2022 preliminary budget for the Development Impact Fees Fund 212I.
Second.
We have a motion by Director Clark or by Director Wood and a second by Director Clark. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
and Kelly.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Your pleasure with item E.
Mr. Chair, I'll move resolution 2021-2022 preliminary budget for the Leased Properties Fund 212L.
Aye. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Director Wood, Director Clark, for item E. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
and Kelly.
Aye.
Motion passes.
What is your pleasure with item F?
Mr. Chair, I'll move item F, resolution 2021-22 preliminary budget for the IGT Fund 212M.
I will second, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion by Director Wood and a second by Director Clark. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
and Kelly.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Last item, letter G. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chair, I'll move item G, resolution adopting a pay schedule for employees.
I will second it.
We have a motion by Director Wood and a second by Director Clark. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Orzali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
and Kelly.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you for the help on that, Directors Wood and Director Clark. All right. Moving on to presentation items.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry about that.
Fire Chief and and Chief Counsel Lavra.
Good evening,
Presentation item one.
directors. Myself, I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit on the California Fire and Rescue Training Authority, and then Council Lavra will maybe add in a few things here at the end. Tonight's discussion is on the notice that we received from Cal OES. Their notice is that they intend to withdraw from the Joint Powers Authority, or the JPA. In their letter, Cal OSHA feels that the current model for the training is no longer effective, or it is not efficient in their mind. Cal OSHA also will be moving their operations, and part of that has to do with the USAR program, along with some of the other training that they sponsor, to the California Specialized Training Institute, or CSTI. We had a meeting, we'll talk a little bit more about the meeting on another report, but the JPA agreed to hire an independent outside counsel to develop a plan for dissolution for being able to move forward. Myself and Council Lavra have gone through and looked at a number of contracts that are involved, and then what is going to be the best position for the district being able to move forward. Other things that we need to be able to look at with the dissolution of the JPA is the people that are there and the employment of the people that are there, the timeline for being able to get that completed, There are things like a 7 years of record retention for anybody that has gone through and done training, and what do we do with those? Contracts that are in place, contracts with FEMA for some of the training that is done with the USAR program or the Urban Search and Rescue program. We are in a lease with them for the Gold Canal, and they did vote to, or we agreed to extend that for 1 year moving forward. And we're in a multi-year lease agreement for the Zinfandel property. As far as assets, we'll have to go through and have a plan for looking at all the assets and within the contracts on how to be able to divide those up for moving forward from there. So while I think that initially there was some thoughts from maybe the OES side that this would be a very quick thing, we are probably looking at up to a year, if not more, of time that it will take during that time to be able to move forward with the dissolution of the actual JPA over there. But as I said, the intent from the OES and the letter from the OES is that they are no longer wanting to be a partner in there. It does give us some options for being able to move forward from really what is the best for us in being able to move forward. I'll turn it over to Council Lavra. If John, you would like to add some comments for being able to move forward, or from there, yes.
Okay, thank you, Chief Harms. Yeah, I've reviewed the JPA agreement and the law that concerns the operation of the JPA and the withdrawal or dissolution of members from the JPA. Cal OES exercised an option under the agreement, which incidentally ends by its own terms in 2027, I believe, to withdraw. Once one member, there's three members of the JPA, Cal OES, Metro Fire, and the City of Sacramento. If one member exercises its option to withdraw, then it's left to the two remaining members to determine whether they go on, or if any one member then withdraws at that point, then the JPA is in the dissolution mode. It is in a situation where it has to dissolve, and there's certain activities and a notice of the withdrawal, if that's what is going to happen here, has to be given at the end of the fiscal year and with 1 year's notice, which Cal OES did. And so if that's the direction that Metro Fire is going to move, that portion of the JPA has to be complied with here prior to the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. Basically, what the law provides in a dissolution, it's not unlike dissolving a business entity. There's some rules for successor agencies which don't apply here, but the general concept is that property or assets that are contributed by a member agency are returned to that member agency at the dissolution. There's rules for commingling assets and what happens to property when assets are commingled to purchase property and things like that, which will have to be looked at as part of the accounting. The other basic point of the dissolution is that the assets and liabilities, once they're accounted for at the end of the withdrawal period and the dissolution period, those assets and liabilities are returned in proportion to the contribution of the member agency. So that's what is going to have to occur over the next year to try to determine what those numbers are in terms of assets and liabilities. Other factor that plays into this is the fact that Metro Fire is not only a member of the JPA, but it's also a landlord on the office building over on Gold Canal, but more importantly on the long-term lease of the Zinfandel property, where there's outdoor training activities that take place on that property. So that's a long-term lease obligation. There's certain remedies in that lease that are available to Metro Fire in the event that the JPA can't go on with that lease, and those factors will all have to be taken into consideration when determining what the appropriate level of return of contributions of assets and the return of liabilities. So in a nutshell, that's what's going to happen by way of the independent counsel that is going to start that process. And I agree with Chief Harms. It's probably looking at a 1-year process to get to the end of the next fiscal year. During that fiscal year, the JPA will continue to operate up until the point of its date of dissolution. At that point, it won't operate, and you'll just be left with whatever accounting functions have to happen. We would come to this board as we have information on those accounting principles, and hopefully in this voluntary dissolution, if that's what happens, we're able to reach a dissolution agreement that is fair and reasonable to all the member agencies, and is something we would bring to this board for its consideration and approval. So that's what I can say about it now in open session, but I will take any questions. That's all I have.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Council Lavra, please.
Director Jones.
Thank
Please.
you. Council Lavra, for this year-long process with the independent work, does the JPA as such assume the costs of this dissolution?
Yes, for the cost of the outside attorney, yes.
Well, what I'm getting at is dissolution costs some money, and will that, in the entirety of those costs, will that come out of the JPA budget?
Yes.
Thank you.
And on our last board meeting, the JPA gave direction to the director over there. The board gave direction to find counsel to be able to do that and continue within their budget to cost that.
Any other questions? No questions as a presentation item. Chief, are you looking for any direction here?
Nope, it was just a presentation, and then we'll come back to the board as we need direction in the future. Thank you.
It'll run its course. Yep. Okay, thank you. Moving on to reports. Under the President's report, I have nothing. Fire Chief?
That was quick. You're back to me already? Okay. I have a number of items. First off, on retirement, we had engineer Kevin Summers. Kevin retired on May 28th with 27 years of service. I think a lot of folks saw Kevin. Kevin was a cook across the district to many events, and boy, supported a lot of fundraising events across the district. Firefighter Craig Sweeney on May 28th was 17 years. And Supervising Inspector Michael Hambrick, effective June 2nd with 27 years. We wish them all well. It was nice to be able to meet with a few of the folks in person again, but that is 70 years of experience leaving the district there. So congratulations to each of them as they go forward. Promotions effective June 1st, Fire Inspector 2 Roman Cleats, promoted to supervising, actually as a Fire Inspector 2, and effective June 7th, Janae Smith promoted to supervising inspector. So a great job with Mike leaving. There's a new blood coming in right behind them. And so 2 great promotions as we move forward. Our paramedic students at ARC are doing just great. I had an opportunity to talk with some folks. They're doing well. One of the toughest parts of it is the cardiac unit, and they were able to finish up the cardiac unit, and now are starting their clinical times. I'm going to brag, but our folks from the fire side and our student from the single role academy are tops in the class as they move forward. They're balancing that home, work, and school life. But one of the things that was a comment back was the ability to go to class and then go to work and then being able to apply it. And it was one of the folks that was out with them and saying that their opportunity to work with their student or with their firefighter and being able to apply it out there The amount of questions and conversations and everything has been just tremendous. So they are doing very well and are moving forward in the program. I did a presentation last night to the South Placer Fire District. If there was any interest in the South Placer Fire District in some type of committee that we would work together to look at the future and if there was any opportunities. It was very poorly received, and there obviously was not support from Placer County individuals for Metro Fire. The board took no action from being able to move that forward. Yes, it was poorly received. So we'll move forward from there. Did some meetings with Homeland Security. We had a meeting on recruitment and diversity along on the 8th. It was the executive staff, some HR folks, the local 522, and the district recruitment team. We had a long discussion on recruitment, where we are at today, what are some of the programs we have tried, what are some of the next steps for moving forward. I think we have a very good plan for moving forward. We are looking for an individual to come to staff temporary and really be the person that is the lead for moving forward. We are also looking at, is there an agency that we can bring in for a consultant to be able to look at what opportunities we have and what are the best things for the district for being able to move forward in recruitment and retention of individuals across the district. So very good meeting. I think we have some things laid out. Chief Casantini is driving that forward for us. And I think that's a great opportunity. On June 15th, our professional staff here in the building will be returning to the building. They will be full-time in the building. We have looked at some future telework, but we feel that it's very important right now is that we get back to stable ground of everybody back into the building, being able to work. Our managers do have the ability to work with people as we go through the transition to make sure that it's a smooth transition. Members will be able to use, there's still an 80-hour COVID bank of time along with their own time for whatever their reasons are that they need, along with FMLA and anything else for being able to move forward. But we look forward to everybody being back in the building on June 15th. And again, another little sign of a little bit of normal coming on. I guess we're gonna have to figure out the mask rules seem to be changing about who can wear a mask and who can't wear a mask and stuff. So I think Chief Casantini is probably going to be at the top of the stairs with the day of on June 15th on what exactly is going to be our goal for wearing masks as we move forward. That ends my report, and I'll turn it over to Chief Mitchell for the operations report.
All right, thanks, Chief. Go ahead and take a drink of water now. You can have a little break time. Good evening, President Kelly, directors. From operations, a few items. As far as EMS goes, I just wanted to highlight tonight a couple of the areas from response information. There's 5 key areas really where our crews can make a really positive impact in dealing with patient care out there by pre-alerting some of those definitive care facilities on what's coming into them. And so since our last meeting, we ran some information, Chief Law and EMS folks, through our CQI module and identified a number of statistics that I wanted to pass on tonight. So since our last meeting, we've had 32 cardiac arrests. 6 of those achieved return of spontaneous circulation in the pre-hospital setting. We've had 12 STEMI alerts, which means patients who had a 12-lead EKG indicating a STEMI, 33 stroke alerts, patients with positive Cincinnati pre-hospital stroke scale assessment, 32 sepsis alerts, patients with a known or suspected history of infection in any 2 sepsis criteria, and 100 critical trauma alerts, which means patients that meet any trauma triage criteria. So that's good news. Our crews continue to do a great job out there and identifying those early to be able to get the hospitals in a position to be able to provide rapid patient care in those 5 different areas to the folks that really need it. Secondly, our staff, EMS staff, provided actually yesterday morning an opportunity for basic first aid and emergency choking procedures training for anybody that was in professional staff. and any new parents, their spouses and things. We were able to host that yesterday in the building. And so that was a well-received event, very successful. We've also assisted Sutter Roseville Hospital with teaching their MICN class back on June 7th. And then finally from EMS, our SRP 21-1 recruits have completed all their academy. One of those recruits is going to do an extension in their training time, and 4 of them actually will be able to count as staffing on June 14th. So that's good news there with the SRP program. From special operations and specifically air operations, they're out there every day since the 15th of May, staffed on a daily basis, doing a good job. But we did have a call recently on June 3rd that I wanted to highlight for everybody because it was, as far as the number of extractions they did, it was a record for the program. So back on June 3rd, we got a request for service out of El Dorado County near the community of Pollock Pines, with a injured worker down in a remote canyon and a co-worker that was there next to him. And we were able, due to our availability and the life threat, to approve the mission. And our copter crew flew up there. They did a great job. They had 4 total hoists. 2 of those hoists were one was for the victim, or one was for the victim's co-worker. And then the firefighters from El Dorado County Fire that had hiked in, we actually hoisted 2 of them out as well to be able to get them out and back to the Pacific Heli spot up by Fresh Pond near Highway 50, if you're familiar with that area, to an area where we can get that victim transported to definitive care and get treatment. So it's a record, if you will, for our program to do 4 hoists in one mission, but it goes to our professionalism in our air operations program and what a great job they do day in and day out. And I will also note, as I noted in the past, that was the flight crew that had the first for Metro, being the full Metro trained flight crew from the pilot all the way to the rescuer. That was also the same crew, Captain Bryce Mitchell, Captain James Doyle, and firefighter Nick Covington. So really, really a positive there from our air operations. Some statistics since our last meeting: we've had 4,141 calls. We've had 23 total structure or building fires. Busiest engine company is going to be Engine 53, 248 calls, or just over 17.5 calls a day. And then our busiest ambulance was Medic 224 with 199. And then on the staffing front, we're continuing to work closely with 522 on staffing. The members out there have stepped up in a great way, and they've been integral in our success of being able to remain fully staffed over the last few weeks. So that's great news there. And then finally, we did host our battalion chiefs exam last week. I'd like to say congratulations going out to Captain Matthew Cole, Captain Brian Barthel, Captain Christopher Vestal, Captain Brian Gonzalez, Captain Scott Perryman, and Captain Kim Fong on their successful completion of the battalion chiefs exam last week. And we do have 4 current openings, and so we'll be looking forward to what that brings here in the near future. With that ends operations report, and I'll turn it back over to you, President Kelly.
Thank you to Chief Mitchell. Report number 3, General Counsel's report. Mr. Lauber, do you have anything?
Yeah, just in a follow-up to the last meeting regarding the Brown Act and the waiver of the teleconference rules to hold the public meetings. We received a letter from the governor's office that indicated that the state of emergency, which allows these meetings to be held the way we're doing it now by Zoom, will remain in effect under that state of emergency order post June 15th. And order to give the agencies time to gear up to go back to in-person meetings. But for the time being, we're able to still conduct these meetings under the waiver of the Brown rules. And I'll keep the Director, President Kelly, and the Chief apprised of further developments from the government's office on that. But for now, we're able to continue status quo. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Labra. Any questions on that matter? Seeing none, we'll move on to Firefighters Local 522. Mr. McGoldrick, are you with us?
I am. Good evening, President Kelly and directors. Not any new information tonight, but congratulations to the retirees. Congratulations to the battalion chiefs candidates who passed the exam process. We are continuing to work through the adjustments in the staffing plan. I can tell you on behalf of the membership, it is important to fully staff our stations. I think we're going to struggle with this issue for quite some time. The only true remedy is additional recruiting, which it sounds like we're on the path to. We're willing to assist any way we can. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to committee and delegate reports. Executive committee, we've got nothing to report. Communications Center, JPA, Deputy Chief Wagaman.
Thank you, President Kelly. Good evening, directors and Chief Harms. The dispatch board last met on June 8th. During that meeting, we had a few action items, and they were as follows. We approved unanimously the first amendment to our fire service medical director contract. And this is a contract that we have with Dr. Mackey. We extended his contract for 6 months, so July through the end of this year. The next item was a quote we received from Paraton, which is our CAD vendor, and they'll be working on an interface for us for a new software program called Live Mum. It's a Deccan product. So this is a part of a software solution that we're going to use to manage move-ups, management of not only fire apparatuses, but ambulances throughout the Sacramento region. So it's going to be a great tool for our dispatchers on the dispatch floor. And lastly, we approved our final budget for fiscal year 21-22. I have to thank Chief Bailey and Deputy Chief House for the extensive work that they did on this budget. They started the budgetary process. Actually, I started it there back in November of last year, just to make sure that all 4 core agencies had all of the information that they needed to in order to walk into their preliminary budget process. That concludes my report, unless you have any questions for me.
Are there any questions of Deputy Chief Wagaman?
Director White, I've got
Director White, go ahead.
When do you anticipate going live with Live Mom, the the medic move up, the Deccan product?
So it's going to be a two-phase project. One is we have to get the interface built first. The second component of that is actually delivery of the software, then getting the two to work together. So the interface that they're going to be building is going to be working with our new CAD software, not the current software. We didn't want to have to purchase 2 interfaces. At this point, we're trying really hard to get our new CAD system up and running by the end of the year. So our hope is that we have this interface done as well, and we will see not only new CAD, but a Live Mum product around the same time as go live. That's the goal.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Having viewed it, I think it will be a valuable tool, and I'm glad to see we're moving in that direction.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, then. Moving on to item C, the California Fire Rescue Training JPA. Chief Harms, I feel like you've already done this.
Oh, we had another meeting over there on June 8th. A large portion of our meeting was with staff, and with the announcement of moving forward and the letter from OES on dissolution. We spent a lot of time talking about where we were at. A lot of it was still things to be planned, but being able to have very open discussions with the staff that's over there. We extended the Gold Canal lease for 1 year. Some discussions on COVID precautions, students being back into the area there, the fiscal year and the wrap up of classes that were offered, USAR training moving forward. And the last thing we did there also was approve the preliminary budget for the next fiscal year. That ends my report.
Well, thank you very much. Moving on to item D, Director Orzali, you have a report for the Finance and Audit Committee.
Yes, the Finance and Audit Committee has not met. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 24th of June. And that concludes my report.
All right, moving on to the Policy Committee, Director Gould.
No report.
No report. All right, shall we roll through board member questions and comments at this time before we go to closed session? What's your preference?
Let the people go home.
Let the people go home. All right, then. we'll work through board member questions and comments. I'll start with Director Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no comments, so the people can go home.
All right, Director Orzali.
I just want to thank Mr. Campos for stepping in and doing the great job that he's done. It's truly appreciated. And so with that, no further report.
Excellent. I echo your sentiments, Director Orzali. Moving on to Director White.
I'd just like to take a minute and congratulate Sac County, even through COVID, keeping the Guns and Hoses football game alive this year with a flag football contest. And to just put this out to Metro Fire that Amador County is hosting their second Guns and Hoses softball tournament and had 2 withdrawals. So we have room for another team to enter the tournament, and would love to see Sac Metros. Yeah, I know Chief Mitchell is warming his arm up right now. I'd love to see Sac Metro put a softball team together and compete if they're so inclined. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you. Director Jones.
Thank you, President Kelly. I would like to acknowledge the promotions and the retirements. Very, very significant. And so congratulations to all of those folks. I'd also like to thank many members of staff from the chief on down. I've reached out over the last couple of weeks on several questions, projects, and potential future activities. And I appreciate the positive response. Thank you.
All right, then moving on to Director Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to be brief. I do want to thank Chief Harms, Chief Mitchell for your assistance in scheduling some time for me to get out and take a look at the air ops. And I want to specifically mention Bryce Mitchell, Monty Van Landingham, Josh Leonard, and Kaylin Clark for their great hospitality and thoroughness in showing me around their operation. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Moving on to Director Clark.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank everyone for their presentation, and congratulations to the retirees and the promotees. That's all I have.
Director Sailors.
Thank you, President Kelly. I do have one issue I would like to bring up tonight. A few days ago, I was contacted by a female firefighter from our membership. She informed me that we had a female firefighter paramedic resign. She was contacting me on behalf of the remaining 13 female firefighters who are concerned by this event. An issue that was brought up to me and I'm bringing forward to this board is the single bathroom issue. Several stations have only one bathroom. This is not even a gender issue. This is a health and safety issue. I would like this item to be put on next meeting's agenda as a presentation item. I would like to see your plan, Chief Harms, and I would like to see the timeline for these projects so that this board may become aware of what you are doing to resolve this issue and that we, the board, may discuss this issue further. Thank you very much. I'd also like to say congratulations to the retirees and the promotions, and congratulations to everyone who successfully passed the BC's exam. Thank you, President Kelly.
You're welcome. And it's to me. Again, I echo Director Orzali's sentiments. I want to thank Mr. Campo for the work that he's done with our district. And I certainly think that I speak for all the board members. It's a comfortable feeling knowing that you're there looking after things until we find a new CFO for this organization. Thank you again. I have nothing else, so we will move to the closed session meeting.